and opportunities do show up, even if I'm taking life slower. I get more time to recognize the opportunities that don't seem fully logical. I was born in China. I lived in a massive city. And when I was 8, my parents decided, you know what would be good for you? Being in a Yorkshire village when you did not speak English. And so I think that 50 quid was probably the best 50 quid I've ever spent.
Hello grown-ups, and welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up with me, Sam Cooper-Gray, your host. This week we chat with Maggie Chen, who founded She's in Charge whilst doing her Masters, but it wasn't even her first entrepreneurial escapade. She started her first business 2 weeks into university, partly because she realised that she was never going to want to have to get up and be at a lecture for 9 a.m. for the rest of her life. She will also tell us about the changes in her life when she was 8 that really taught her resilience, the importance of play, and actually she could pretty much cope with anything. So please do join me in welcoming Maggie to the podcast. So welcome, Maggie, and I'm really excited to interview you today. So we're going to kick off with the question I ask everybody. So tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me, Sam. I'm really excited to chat with you. So I guess let's start from when I was 8, because that was the first massive change in my life. I was born in China. I lived in a massive city. And when I was 8, my parents decided, you know what would be good for you? Being in a Yorkshire village when you did not speak English. And so they dragged me halfway across the world, popped me in a Yorkshire village,
Wow.
And equipped me with the one sentence, excuse me, can I go to the toilet, please? And sent me off to school. The entire school had 100 people, like nursery all the way to year 6. And I didn't know what to do. It was a complete alien culture to me. I couldn't speak the language. I felt so isolated and different because everyone was British. And it was just really, really terrifying that first day. But when break time came around, a sudden connection was built between me and my classmates because, as we all know, play doesn't require language. And when you're that young, you can just somehow manage, right? You just play and everyone's connecting, laughing, and it just flows. So that was the first moment I felt that connection between cultures. So I'm going to fast forward to 18 and leave out the boring bits. And I go to university. I'm going to go fast forward through Freshers Week because that doesn't need to be written. And we go to first week of lectures. Every single day I have 9 a.m. lectures. And by the 5th day, I thought, I can't do this. I will never be able to get a real job. This is back in the day, no flexible working, no hybrid working. You have to be at the office. And I thought, there are 2 ways I can approach this problem. I can either practice getting up and become a morning person, or I can be my own boss, start a business of some kind. And so I am where I am today because I am not a morning person. And a month later, I started my first business. And it was called Shut Up and Dance because it was my favorite song at the time and I was a child. And the company specialized in ballroom and Latin dancewear because I had an absolute craze for dance shoes. So that experience was really interesting for me because I learned the basics of business. My degree was in languages and culture, absolutely no use to starting a business. And my parents were like, should you really be doing that? Shouldn't you focus on the degree? You know, we've spent a lot of money to get you here. Shouldn't you focus on that? Anyway, so I spun it as, well, my languages skills really help me with this business because I can expand to other countries and converse with customers in France and use my French and customers in Spain. So 1 year in, the business turns over £40,000, which for a business, it's not a lot, but for a 19-year-old at the time, great spending money. And so I joined the accelerator program at university. But out of the 40 people on the program, I was the only girl. The accelerator itself helped me really build the business, give it the branding that it needs, really took me through the steps of business. But thinking back to 8-year-old Maggie, I felt that isolation again, that difference. Not that anyone was mean to me, but you kind of just know you're different, and you don't get to be in on the banter. I don't understand football. Like, it just didn't feel completely at home. So by the final year of university, the one thing I was terrified of doing was public speaking. And I thought, if I don't have a go now, I'm never going to have a go. If I fail at university, no one's going to know. So I sign up to an event hosted by a new society. No one knows of them, Women in Business. And I say, look, I think this event's going to be about 20 to 30 people. I'd really like to dip my toe into public speaking. Do you mind if I have a 5-minute slot to share my startup story at university? They're like, great, welcome. 2 weeks before the event, I get a Facebook message. Hey, Maggie, we're oversubscribed. 800 people have signed up.
Wow.
Yeah. We've moved it to the largest lecture theatre in the entire university. I say, okay. And then I get a follow-up message. Do you mind making your story 15 minutes because we think it's going to really resonate with the people coming, i.e. your peers? And I couldn't back out anymore. So I did it. Absolutely terrified. And I'm very short. You can't see on this, but I'm very short, and I'm on this massive stage shaking in front of 800 people and telling this story of how I started this dancewear business at university with zero business knowledge. And so the experiencing itself was really very much how I learned to swim in China. They literally just threw me in the deep end and said, swim. Obviously, we had floaties, but this public speaking session very much was like that. But the thing that really struck me was after I did the talk, after the event, all of these young women, my peers, same university, doing mostly business degrees, came up to me and said, what you're doing is so cool. I would never be able to do that. And I think, why? Your degree is literally preparing you with all of the knowledge you need. What is it that you don't believe you have? And so there were 3 types of answers. And this happened at every single event I spoke at subsequently. The first one was, I don't have the personality for it. As if there is a specific type of person who is an entrepreneur. And now doing my doctoral research, I see that actually the media at that time and running up to that time very much shows us white male entrepreneurs who are quite aggressive and very confident. And so, of course, young women back then didn't think I had the personality for it. The second thing was, I don't have an idea. I can't do anything cool. And I say, have you tried to think of an idea? And generally, the answer is no, right? And then the third answer is fine. Even if I had an idea, I wouldn't know where to begin. And this was pre-AI. But of course, we still had Google. Why is that not a resource considered useful? So I thought about all of the conversations I had and realized it really came down to a big issue in confidence, a big issue in skills, entrepreneurial skills, and a big issue in the lack of a community for young women, for women in general, actually, in entrepreneurship. So the seeds of Girls in Charge was really sown at that moment. And approximately another year later, I have Asian parents, so I did a master's degree. And so during this master's degree, I launched Girls in Charge. And here we used gamification as the tool to bring young women together, equip them with entrepreneurial skills, and build self-awareness of what they already know, how they can apply that knowledge to different tasks. And more importantly, in that gamification setting, you're so busy playing, you build rapport so much easier, right? Thinking back to 80-year-old Maggie, who couldn't even speak English, using games, I managed to bridge a completely alien culture and make friends and really eventually integrate into the culture. So taking that same logic, I applied it to entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurship, to these scary concepts, as people called it, our participants called it. And so that was really, I would say, the beginning of the journey. And with Girls in Charge, it was just crazy. It was a project that I thought, could I make people do silly things and also get them to learn something at the same time? Maybe build a community, who knows? Let's try it out. By month 4, we were at the House of Lords, and it just couldn't be contained anymore. And we basically turned a small project we launched at 5 universities into a movement. And a year on, we were asked by corporates, hey, that thing you're doing at universities, that looks fun. Do you want to come and run it for us? And so I said, sure. Could you pay us? And of course they could. So that was how Girls in Charge actually started working with companies. Now we're 8 years in. We've built up the social mission. We've impacted over 7,500 beneficiaries. We are in 4 different countries, actually 5 now. And we very, very recently launched the Gamechangers Initiative, because as the corporates were jealous of the students, the men are now jealous of the women. So we kept on asking, hey, that gamification thing you do, could you do that for our networking event or our competition to a more general audience? So Gamechangers Initiative was launched to basically use our live social gamification method on anything really that you want, whether it's an event or internal process. We gamify everything now. So it's been quite a journey, and I would say that it's given me the opportunity to be in rooms that I would never consider or ever have thought about, to meet people across the world doing really, really interesting things, and just gain a very wide perspective in all sorts of industries and at all sorts of levels.
I mean, what a journey so far that you've had. I love it. See, if I take you back to your 8-year-old self, like that must have been such a kind of defining moment, because your parents didn't come with you, did they? They sent you, I'm assuming, to boarding school.
My mum came.
Your mum came. Okay.
Yeah.
So just talk to me a little bit about kind of what that 8-year-old you learned in those 10 years that really equipped you when you got to university to, within the first week, going, this is just not going to work for me. Because that's confidence, as you'll have seen from all of the women that you've worked with over the last 8 years, that is a confidence I think most 18-year-olds probably wouldn't have, even if it was driven by your desire to not get up at 9 o'clock, which I think most 18-year-olds do have. But kind of, there were obviously some, that was a big thing to do, to come to a country where you didn't speak the language. That must have been very formative in your 18-year-old self having the confidence to go, do you know what, I'm just going to start a side hustle. Because I think you're right. Like what all those other girls said to you who were doing those business degrees is so true, that actually very few people irrelevant of gender have the presence of mind to do that when they're 18.
I think adaptability is really what that experience taught me, right? I came in, I went to school, not speaking the language, and then we had circle time. What? In China, you go to school, you sit at your desk, you sit up straight with your arms folded, you have to have your hair a certain way, you have to dress exactly how you were told to. And then at British school, you know, everyone has different hair colors, even at that age. Natural hair colors different. People had their hair styled to show individuality. People had different bags. People had different coats. And then circle time. That was so confusing for me. You know, growing up, I was told you do not sit on the floor. The ground is dirty. There's a lot of bacteria. You do not sit on the ground. And the first thing we do, everyone sits on the carpet in a circle. And I'm like, what is this? And I used to crouch for the first month. I used to just crouch on the ground because, one, I didn't understand the concept. Two, I know that I have been told not to sit on the ground. So what is this? And then I really, once I did learn in English, which took about 3 months to get to a level where I can converse with my peers badly, but still generally understand each other, is that during circle time, people share a lot of stories. And I think that really shaped the understanding of perspective, because in China, we didn't have that. The perspective is whatever the teacher told you, you memorize it, and that is your perspective. So I think having had that Chinese education where I got really good at memorizing things and, you know, regurgitating and doing the tasks, then coming into an environment where critical thinking, free thinking, understanding different people's perspectives was really strongly encouraged, gave me such a different way of looking at the world and adapting to all of these different challenges, whether it is understanding the ground is okay to sit on, or that, you know, learning English was really not as big a challenge as I think if I were thrown in a different country now and told you have to learn this language, because at 8 years old, you don't think of it that way. So that adaptability and that perspective really, I think, built me up and shaped how I approach things over the course of high school, but more importantly at university, when you had so much more freedom to do things, because obviously high school you get more rules imposed on you, and that kind of creativity or adaptability doesn't stand out as much as once you have the freedom again.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think so there were those formative things that, having been thrown into that, you had to learn that maybe a lot of other people don't, if they've not had those big moments when they're younger, right? That actually it did teach you all of those things. So the idea of starting a business didn't scare you in the same way as maybe it would have done if you'd stayed in school in China, or if you'd always experienced the schooling that you experienced in the UK. So you're obviously 8 years into the business. If your 18-year-old self, who was, you know, just coming through Freshers Week, hating her 9 a.m. lectures, if she could see you now, what would she recognise in you? What are the characteristics that she'd really go, yeah, I was like that, I can see that in me? What would she recognise?
I think definitely the enthusiasm and drive, in the sense that I'm still always excited by new things. I like new things and trying different things out and just seeing what happens if. I think that's definitely something that has always been in me, and again, probably shaped by that 8-year-old self being just thrown into something new, right? I had no choice for that one, but then the subsequent things I tested out or tried out, you know, those were my choices.
And I guess having been thrown into it and not had a choice, it makes making those choices much easier, because you kind of knew you'd be okay.
Or I could probably recover from it. We'll see.
So if I flip that question on its head then, if she could see you now, what would your 18-year-old self be like? Wow, I never expected that.
I would say the calmness that I now have. I think even my family in China, my relatives who came and visited a couple of years ago, don't recognize that in me because I was always go, 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 go. And suddenly they come and visit me and I'm like, oh, I need to do gardening this morning. Like the plants need watering or whatever. I think 18-year-old Maggie would be like, that is such an old lady kind of hobby to have. But that calmness and recognition that it's not always go, go, go. You need downtime. You need time to recover and also to just sit in the present. I think she probably wouldn't recognize that.
And how did you learn that? So where in your journey, what helped you to learn that kind of just sitting and being is as important as the doing?
I think one is health. So when I was 15, I was diagnosed with CFSME, which basically is a very, very bad hangover every day without the drinking bit, without any of the fun. So I was basically bedridden for a couple of years while still going through the GCSEs and A-levels. But that whole experience over basically till the end of my master's degree taught me that health is important, but the part of me was always trying to drive, this isn't going to stop you. You have to get through the exams. You have to write this essay. You have to go, 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 go. There is no extending the deadline. There is no kind of special treatment just because you're unwell. You just have to do it. But once the master's degree was over, I had a year between the master's and PhD. Told you I have Asian parents, so PhD. But that 1 year, I suddenly went, life could be slower if I took the time for it to be. Mm-hmm. And opportunities do show up even if I'm taking life slower. I get more time to recognize the opportunities that don't seem fully logical or sometimes not as visible. And I just get to think about things and reflect on what I've done so far. So I think slowly that built up, and just taking maybe 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there to really think about what have I done. And in fact, doing more podcasts and doing more public speaking, and as people ask me, how did this shape X, Y, and Z, it made me reflect and made me think about all of the things that I've done, maybe the opportunities I've passed by, and just have those moments of calm, have those moments of peace to myself, and maybe, just maybe, not even think about work. That would be good. And I think that's something I truly, truly appreciated in the past couple of years, especially kind of as COVID was over. I suddenly realized actually that period we had a lot more time to ourselves, a lot more quiet, and that really does change my perspective and change my approach to work or life.
I think having that time to just be and sit, as you say, sometimes then the universe brings stuff to you rather than you kind of running at it really hard all the time. And I mean, you blow me away in some ways, because you told me all that story about kind of moving to the UK, growing up here, going to university, starting the business, all the stuff you've done, and then you're flipping at 15, you ended up doing a couple of years in bed because you weren't well. I think that's it's very typical of high performers, where something to some people would have been so major, it would have been a first story they would tell. To you, was just like, well, it happened and I got on with it. And it never occurred to me to not sit my GCSE, sit my A-levels, still go to university, do a master's, and then reflect, actually, maybe slowing down enables me to do everything better. So
I think it may be one. It's probably the Asianness in me. We don't dwell on the bad things, but also I think a large part of me, I think over that period, just pretended it wasn't happening so that I could get on with it. And I think that, that psychology does shape how I tell the story as well.
yeah, and I think it is clearly inherent in you to just push on. You know, throughout the story that you've told me of your life, that's very clear, which is you'll find a way either through or round. So, what's the best decision you've ever made?
I would say it was setting up Girls in Charge, and specifically putting in 50 quid to start Girls in Charge. It's a funny story. So Girls in Charge was never meant to be its standalone organization ever. The idea was sown to help young women through gamification. And at the time, my co-founder and I, who subsequently exited, and we're still good friends, but we approached a much larger female empowerment organization, pitched the idea, they really liked it, and said, why don't you write a proposal? And we had maybe 4 months of back and forth on the proposal, on how we're going to launch it, etc., etc. And by the end of this 4 month, bearing in mind we've spent many, many hours working this out, we'd had multiple meetings being passed around different departments, and we get an email saying, actually, this isn't the direction we want to go in anymore. No clarification, nothing. And we followed up, but we never got anything back. And we just thought, what a waste. And so we thought, what if we just sacrifice one night out, put 50 quid in each, and just launch a website, see what happens. And that's literally the beginning of Girls in Charge, of how we ended up working with 5 universities in the first first pilot, if you like. And so I think that 50 quid was probably the best 50 quid I've ever spent.
That is a great answer. I love that. What a brilliant answer. A very good use of £50. And I think sometimes when we're starting in business, I think we make it up to be a really big thing, right? I know so many people who've got an idea and are like, but it'll cost too much and it's too difficult to do. And some of the greatest bits of advice we've been given on this show, one of them is like, just start. Like, if you never start, you'll not get anywhere, and it may not work. But if you just start, you just put that 50 quid in, you have one less night out. Yeah. Actually, it could be the thing that you end up kind of almost defining your life. But if you don't start and you just have the big idea, we can die with a big idea and it not have achieved anything. So yeah, I get that. That £50 was a very good spend of £50, I feel. Through that journey, I am sure you've been given lots of advice. And probably been asked to give advice as well over the years. What's one of the best piece of advice that you've been given, but you chose to ignore?
I would say, and this made me so angry at the time, if you want to scale a business, don't do a PhD. This was during the time that I was trying to decide whether or not to do the PhD. And like I said, Asian parents, they were like, you do a PhD. And I am very academic. I enjoy research. I enjoy looking at the nitty-gritty, how things work, why they happen. And so I was quite, I guess, stumped by this decision. And one guy basically said, I don't even know why you're considering doing a PhD. If you want to scale this business, which you're so passionate about, then you shouldn't be doing it. And obviously I didn't listen. And of course, the business didn't scale as fast as it probably would have if I didn't do the PhD and worked on it full time. But it scaled naturally. The momentum grew naturally. We're getting really good supporters. And I think in a way, if we did scale and I didn't do the PhD, it would have looked very different today. And actually, I like the way it looks today. And I enjoy doing the research I'm doing. So yes, it was actually, in hindsight, a very logical, good piece of advice, but it's all worked out.
And clearly, whoever gave you that advice completely underestimated you.
Well, I suppose so.
And I think that's great, because I think sometimes our gut tells us what's right to do, right? Which is clearly your gut was like, actually, the PhD is really important to me. It's kind of that learning and continuing to learn and research. But it's not an all or nothing. But just doing that doesn't mean you couldn't do the other thing. And I think sometimes the most successful businesses are the ones that take their time to grow, because then you get to make mistakes without them being, fundamental to the business's survival. And so actually it has probably enabled you to grow it into what you wanted it to do, whilst also giving you all that benefit from doing more research and doing the PhD. So I like to ask this question of everybody, and this is about a challenge to set to our listeners. So if you could give our listeners a personal challenge that you think will help them with their lives or their business, or just make them happier, what's the challenge you would set them to actively go and do something?
I would say 1 day without a screen, no phone, no laptop, no TV. And this is coming from someone who researches the media representation of entrepreneurship. I spend all day on screens, right? But time feels so different when you don't have any screens. And I think this is going back to that conversation we had about finding peace and calmness in a very busy life. Spend 1 day, one Saturday, no phone, nothing. Just go on an adventure, drive somewhere random, and just feel your way. I think that really changes the way you see time and you see how you spend your time, because we doom scroll, we're so attached to our phones, we're so attached to screens. I remember being on honeymoon, and the two of us, one of us is there on a beach scrolling through Slack, one of us is scrolling through emails. And this was 5 days into our honeymoon, and we just couldn't relax. And so I think learning to relax in this day and age is probably the biggest challenge for all of us, but actually the most beneficial.
Oh my God, I'm going to try that. Like some of the advice, some of the challenges that people give, and I'm like, that sounds too hard. But I actually think that one is really hard, but is so important. I'm a nightmare for doom scrolling. It's so easy, isn't it? And you can lose hours doing it. And it aligns with a piece of advice that another one of our guests, an amazing woman called Amber Vodigal, gave. And she went on a plane and someone had downloaded something onto her phone, and she was playing a game, and she lost 3 hours, and she was like, never again. She was like, I just sat and played this game for 3 hours and never again, because she realized how easy it would be. And I think that's very linked. And I'm sat here thinking, could I do a day without my phone? So it might bring me out.
It's a challenge,
but I should do it. I should absolutely do it. So we've come to the end of the time we've got today, and thank you so much for joining us. But I always ask everyone this one question, which is, if the guide existed, if a beginner's guide to a grown-up existed in book form, which is very good if we get it in book form because it's away from your phone, what's the one piece of advice you would put into the beginner's guide to being a grown-up?
Firstly, I still don't quite categorize myself as a grown-up, so take this with a pinch of salt. But I would say that the things that you regret are the things that you didn't do, as opposed to the things that you did do. So this is similar to the advice you mentioned before, just start, right? And I say this not necessarily just for your career or professional life, but also for your personal life. The things that you regret most are the things that you didn't do. And chances are it probably isn't just starting that business or going for that job halfway around the world. It might just be, I wish I'd caught up with my friend. We'd been sending reels to each other for the past 6 years, but never made the time to actually catch up in person. So I think we neglect our personal lives. We neglect our sanity a little bit in this day and age. So making time for yourself, making time for those that you love should definitely be on the guide.
I love it. I don't think there is a better way to finish the podcast, because I think that is so true. I mean, I'm hoping will resonate with our listeners. So, Maggie, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about your story, about the amazing organisation that you run, and the highs and lows along the journey you've had so far of being, we'll call it pretending to be a grown-up, because I think that's what all of us are actually doing. I think we are all just making it up. It's a very common theme of what people say to me. So thank you so much for coming on as a guest today and sharing your insight with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. Please do like, follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And don't forget, we are now on video on Spotify as well as on our YouTube channel. Next week, I interview Vivian Hayhoe. Now, Vivian is an exit planning expert and advisor. But before that, she was a doctor. And there's quite a story to tell in how she got from one to another. So do join us next week to listen to her story. And in the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.